Lev returns home, or rather, to the large, cold house where he lives alone. Things have been difficult today, unimportant. He longs for nothing but silence and darkness. His black car comes to a smooth stop at the entrance gate. The guard in the booth nods and presses a button. The gates slowly begin to slide open. At that moment, it starts to rain. Not heavily, but unpleasantly, autumnally. Lev looks out the car window at the wet asphalt, illuminated by the streetlights, and then he notices her. A girl sits against the wall of an old garage, across the street from his house. She has pulled her knees up to her chest and rested her head on them. Her shoulders are shaking slightly. Lev realizes she's crying. And she's crying desperately, oblivious to the rain that's already soaking her light jacket and tangled dark hair. Lev looks at her emotionlessly. His first thought is to drive on by. Every day in the city, someone cries. Everyone has their own problems. He has enough of his own. It's not his concern at all. He's used to dealing only with issues that concern his own affairs. Everything else is white noise, background noise. The driver also sees the girl. He glances briefly at Lev in the mirror, waiting for a command. There is no command. The gate is wide open. The car could already be moving, but something catches Lev's eye. Perhaps it's her utter vulnerability. She's sitting on the cold concrete, in the dark, in the rain, and it seems she has no plan at all. Nowhere to go, no one to call. She doesn't look like someone asking for help. She's simply given up. And in this surrender, there was a strange, aching sincerity. Lev sighs. He winces in irritation. This is stupid. So stupid. But his hand is already reaching for the door handle. Wait here, he says curtly to the driver. Lev gets out of the car. The rain immediately bites into his face like icy needles. He adjusts his coat and crosses the street. His footsteps echo loudly in the evening silence of this quiet neighborhood. He approaches and stops 2 steps away from her. She doesn't notice him. All he can hear is her quiet, choking sobs. Lev sees that she is very young. In her arms is a simple plastic bag stuffed with something soft, perhaps clothes. She looks lost and pitiful. Lev stands there for a few seconds, unsure of what to say. He's not a consigliere. He's not a psychologist. He's a man used to giving orders, but right now, there's clearly nothing to order. Finally, he speaks. His voice sounds slightly hoarse from fatigue, but quiet, without the usual commanding firmness. Who offended you? The girl flinches as if struck. She lifts her head abruptly. Her large, dark eyes, filled with tears, are wide with fear and surprise. She sees before her a tall stranger in an expensive coat. His face in the shadows seems stern and unkind. She presses herself against the wall, instinctively trying to make herself smaller. I'm not bothering anyone, she blurts out, her voice breaking. I'll just sit for a while and then leave. Lev sees her trying to suppress a shiver, from the cold or from fear. That's not what I asked, he says, without raising his tone. Who kicked you out? She looks at him, trying to decide whether he's dangerous or not. Then her gaze dims again. What difference does it make? It can't get any worse. A guy, she breathes out, lowering her head again. I lived with him, his apartment. We had a fight. He threw out my things. And me too. He told me not to come back. She speaks briefly, abruptly, as if she'd memorized this bitter formulation. There's no complaint in her words. Only a statement of fact. This fact sounds like a sentence. Lev looks at her silently, at that bag, all her belongings, at her cheeks, wet from the rain and tears. He glances around. The street is empty. It's dark. Not a single open door, not a single light in a cafe where he could go to warm up. He looks at her again. She's wrapped in her thin jacket, and her shoulders are shaking slightly again. A logical, correct thought flashes through Leo's mind. Give her money, call his man to find her some shelter for the night, and leave. Do a good deed from a distance, and forget about it. It's rational, safe. But another thought, quiet and stubborn, whispers, if she goes to the shelter with a wad of cash from a stranger, by morning she'll have neither the money nor the bag left, and she'll end up back here, on this same wet concrete. Leo grits his teeth. He hates irrational actions. And this one will be just that. He takes a step forward. The girl shudders again. Get up, he says. His voice takes on a commanding tone again, but it's not harsh. It's firm. Sitting here is no use. You'll catch a cold. She looks at him with a silent question. He already turns and makes an impatient gesture with his hand towards his car. Let's go. I won't touch you. You just can't stay outside. She rises slowly, awkwardly. Her legs are numb. She picks up her wet bag and takes an uncertain step, then another. She doesn't understand what's happening, but her instinct tells her that a warm car is better than a cold wall. Lev walks alongside, not turning around. He can't believe what he's doing. He approaches the car and opens the back door. Sit down. The driver stares straight ahead. his face completely stony. He's a professional and doesn't show his surprise. The girl freezes at the threshold, looking at the clean interior. She is all wet and dirty. I'll wet the seat, she whispers. It doesn't matter. Sit down. She climbs inside and presses herself against the door, trying to take up as little space as possible. She holds the bag on her lap, clutching it with both hands. Lev sits down next to her, sighing heavily. The door slams shut. "Let's go," he says to the driver. The car starts moving smoothly. It's warm and quiet inside. The only sound is the rain pattering on the roof. The girl sits motionless, looking out the window at the lights drifting past. She's stopped crying. Now, only deep weariness and wariness can be discerned in her. Lev stares straight ahead. He's asked his question, and now he bears responsibility for it. At the very least, for this night. The car drives along the wet streets. It's quiet inside. Lev doesn't look at the girl. He stares out the window, but he senses her tension. She sits motionless, her fingers tightly clutching the edges of the wet bag. Finally, he turns his head. "What's your name?" She slowly tears her gaze away from the lights outside the window. "Iris," she says quietly. Her voice still trembles. "Lev," he responds. He says nothing more about himself and doesn't ask any more questions. The car drives a few more blocks. Iris seems to thaw a little in the warmth. She carefully wipes her cheeks with her sleeve. "Thank you," she whispers into the space between them, still not looking at him, "for stopping. I just didn't know where to go." He nods without answering. "This guy," Lev begins, his voice neutral, non-judgmental. "Have you lived together for a long time?" Iris flinches, as if touching a wound. "A year. Almost a year." She pauses, collecting her thoughts. Her story comes out in short, clipped sentences, as if she's afraid of wasting too many words. "His apartment. I was just living there, helping out around the house, looking for a job. We had an argument today, about something trivial. He told me to pack my things. I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He put my things in this bag and threw them out the door. Then he pushed me out. Said he'd throw everything in the dumpster if I didn't leave. I left." She falls silent. There's nothing more to add. The story really does fit in 30 words. There are no dramatic details, only the naked, humiliating truth. She was thrown out, like an unwanted object. Lev listens in silence. His face is expressionless. Something cold and heavy stirs inside. He's seen plenty of meanness in life, but such everyday cruelty, directed at someone weaker, always evoked a quiet, cold contempt in him. It's not according to the rules. Even in his harsh world, there are rules. He looks at her bag again, at her thin jacket. Now she's saying she didn't know where to go. And really where? To her friends? If she had any, she would have called by now. To her family? Apparently they don't exist, or their relationship is ruined. All that's left is the street or the shelter, where, as he thought, they'll take everything she has. The car approaches an intersection. To the right is the road to his house. To the left is another neighborhood, where he owns several apartments, empty, for various purposes. The driver slows, awaiting instructions. Lev glances at Iris. She's staring out the window again, turning away so he can't see her face. Her profile in the streetlights looks very young and tired. It's irrational, stupid, fraught with problems. He knows nothing about her. She could be anyone. It's a risk. Logic screams at him to tell the driver the address of the nearest mid-range hotel, give her the money, and forget about it. But another part of him, the one that once felt abandoned somewhere else, doesn't listen to logic. "Take me to Gorokovia 15, he tells the driver, his voice sounding like a self-inflicted sentence. The driver freezes for a split second, only the slight movement of his eyebrows betraying his utter surprise. He nods quickly. "Okay, boss." Iris turns her head at the unfamiliar address. Fear flashes in her eyes again. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Lev answers shortly. "For one night. There you can come to your senses." 20 minutes later, they pull up to a nondescript but new building. The driver unlocks the front door with a special key. They take the elevator to the 4th floor. Lev leads Iris down the hallway to one of the doors. He opens it with the same key and turns on the light. It's an apartment. Modern, clean, but completely impersonal, like a room in a good hotel. It has all the necessary furniture, a sofa, a bed in the bedroom, a table, a TV. There's a refrigerator and a stove in the kitchen. But there are no pictures on the walls, no dishes in the cupboards, no clothes in the wardrobe. No one lives here. Lev enters first, checking with a quick glance that everything is in order. He goes to the refrigerator and opens it. Inside are bottles of water, nothing else. "This is quarantine," he says, turning to Iris, who has paused in the doorway. "I sometimes have business partners staying here. Not for long." You'll be here today. Iris steps inside cautiously. She takes in the sterile cleanliness. I can't accept this, she says, but there's no longer any strength for resistance in her voice. You can, for one night. Lev takes his wallet out of his pocket. He takes out a few bills and places them on the glass table. In the morning, buy yourself something to eat, clothes, whatever you need. There's security in the house. No one will touch you on the street. Don't open the door to strangers. Here's the key. He puts the key next to the money. I don't know how to thank you, Iris says, her eyes filling with tears again. But these are tears of relief this time. No need, just rest. I'll come by tomorrow morning. We'll talk. He takes another look around the apartment, making sure there's nothing here that could harm her or that she could ruin. A safe cage. That's what he mentally calls such places. Isolated, controlled. Good night, Iris, he says, and steps out into the hallway, closing the door behind him. He hears the lock click. As he descends, Lev again asks himself why he did it. There's no clear answer, only a quiet certainty that doing otherwise would have been worse. An irrational decision has been made. Now he needs to see what happens next. Morning finds Lev in his office. He hasn't slept much. The thought of yesterday's irrational act haunts him. He drinks coffee and looks out the window at the city. His men have already reported. The girl hasn't left the apartment on Gorokovaya Street. Security is silent, meaning all is quiet. Lev drives there around midday. On the way, he imagines what he'll find. There are two options: an empty apartment and missing money, or a girl begging for something, crying and getting under his feet. Both options are irritating. He almost regrets his weakness. He opens the door with his key. The first thing he sees is impeccable cleanliness. The floor has been washed, even though Iris's shoes were wet yesterday. The dust on the table and nightstands is gone. The air is fresh, smelling of something simple and clean. Iris emerges from the bedroom. She looks different. Her face is washed, her hair neatly pulled back. She's wearing clean but simple jeans and a gray sweater, apparently bought this morning. She doesn't smile, but she looks straight ahead. Her posture lacks the stiffness of yesterday. Good afternoon, she says quietly. Lev nods, looking around. The money on the coffee table is gone. That's logical, but on the kitchen table, he sees two discreet bags from a nearby store. A receipt lies nearby. I bought food, Iris says, following his gaze, for a few days. And one more thing. If you don't mind, I can return it. She carefully removes a bundle of fabric from the second bag. She unfolds it. It's a tablecloth, cheap, synthetic, but with a bright, sunny pattern. Yellow flowers on a blue background. It's completely out of place in the apartment's austere, minimalist interior. It's loud, simple, and full of life. Iris spreads it out on the glass table in the living room. The bright spot instantly transforms the entire space. The sterile room seems to breathe in. It's too empty here, she explains, not looking at Lev. But this way, it's more fun. Lev glanced back and forth between the tablecloth and her. He'd expected anything but this. Not this quiet attempt to create a cozy atmosphere in this impersonal temporary shelter. This action spoke volumes. She hadn't run away. She hadn't simply spent the money on herself. She'd bought food, budgeted for several days, and even kept the receipt. And she'd also bought this ridiculous living tablecloth. He walks over to the refrigerator and opens it. Inside, the food is neatly arranged. Milk, butter, cheese, eggs, yogurt, nothing extra. Everything basic and practical. A loaf of black bread lies on the shelf. Have you had breakfast? Iris asks suddenly. Lev closes the refrigerator. No, I can make scrambled eggs. Or just sandwiches, if you want. Her offer doesn't sound like ingratiation, but rather like normal human politeness. Lev suddenly realizes that in his own huge house, no one has asked him if he's had breakfast for years, or offered to make him scrambled eggs. He declines. He needs to get to the office, but he lingers another minute. He watches Iris carefully fold the empty bags and straighten the tablecloth on the table. She moves through the apartment calmly, efficiently, not like a guest, but like someone who has tidied up her temporary home and now feels, if not at home, then at least safe. It was at this moment that a new, even more irrational decision took shape in Leo's mind. It came not as a flash of insight, but as a cold, measured calculation. True, it wasn't a business-like calculation, but something else entirely. His home is a fortress, large, cold, filled with expensive things he barely notices. A cleaning lady works there 3 times a week. She mops the floors, dusts, and leaves. The house remains empty, dead. Leo only goes there to sleep. Sometimes this depresses him, but he never allows himself to think about it. A home is not a living space. It's part of his image, an asset, a refuge. But now he looks at this cheap tablecloth and Iris's calm movements, and a simple thought occurs to him. What if home could be more than just a refuge? What if it could contain life? Not his criminal, hard life, but a normal, simple life. The smell of food. A cleanliness that's felt not by the eye, but in the soul. Someone asking if he's had breakfast. It's a risk, a huge one, letting a stranger into your personal space, your fortress. But yesterday's risk, strangely enough, didn't lead to any bad consequences. On the contrary, Lev takes a deep breath. Iris! She turns around, stopping wiping the now clean countertop. I'm offering you a job. She freezes, her eyes wide. I have a house. A very big one, and very empty. It needs someone, not an hourly cleaner, but a housekeeper, to keep things in order, to stock up on groceries, maybe cook simple meals. Live there. You'll have your own room, a salary. It will be your place. He speaks evenly, without emotion, as if discussing a business contract. Will you try? A month, say. If you don't like it, or it doesn't suit me, we can part ways peacefully. You'll have the money and time to find another option. Iris looks at him, completely stunned. She searches his face for a catch, a joke, but she sees only seriousness. I don't know what to say. I'm not a professional housekeeper. I see that you can clean up. Lev glances at the apartment and the tablecloth. And you have a head on your shoulders. You didn't run off with the money. That's enough for now. You'll learn the rest. He waits. Iris nods slowly, as if to herself. Her face becomes focused. Yes, I'll try. I'll do my best. Thank you. Thank you again. Okay, says Lev. Pack your things. New purchases, too. A car will pick you up in an hour. The driver will take you there. I'll meet you there in the evening. He leaves the apartment, leaving her alone to process what's happening. He goes downstairs to the car. His heart is beating a little faster than usual. He's just taken another step into the unknown. He's letting change into his life. And the strange thing is, he feels almost no fear. Rather, he feels a slight, unusual curiosity. A black car pulls up to a high iron fence. Iris looks out the window. She sees a large stone house. It looks old, solid, and very serious. No bright colors, just gray stone and dark green shutters. The car drives through the gate, which silently opens and closes behind it. Lev is waiting for her on the steps by the front door. He nods silently and opens the heavy door. Iris steps inside and freezes. She expected to find herself in a wealthy home, but she didn't expect this. A spacious hall with the high ceiling. The walls were covered in dark wood and some old maps in formal frames. The floor was laid with cold marble. Everything was spotlessly clean, yet it felt as if no one lived here. The air smelled of polish and emptiness. This is the hallway. Beyond that is the living room, dining room, kitchen. The bedrooms are on the second floor. Lev's voice echoes in the space. Your room is upstairs, next to the master bedrooms. It's not small. It has everything you need. He leads her through the house. The rooms are huge, filled with expensive but gloomy furniture, heavy curtains, dark carpets. The huge stainless steel kitchen is crumb-free. Not a single cup on the table. All the cabinets are closed. It feels like a museum or a very expensive hotel where you've stayed for one night. Iris follows him silently. She feels like a bug in this vast, silent space. Her small bag of things seems especially pitiful now. Lev shows her her room. It's truly large and comfortable. It has its own bathroom, a large closet, a bed, and a desk. The window looks out onto the garden. Everything is new, high quality, and as impersonal as everything else in this house. The rules are simple, Lev says, stopping in the middle of her room. Organize as you see fit. Groceries are ordered once a week. The list is on the tablet in the kitchen. If anything is missing, write it down. My office is that door at the end of the hallway on the second floor. Don't go in there. Any questions? Ask me. Iris nods. I understand. That's where their conversation ends. Lev leaves to do his business. Iris is left alone in the vast, silent house. She sits on the bed and listens to the silence. It's so loud. The only sound is the ticking of a clock in the distance. For the first few days, Iris moves around the house like a shadow. She's afraid to break or touch anything. She explores the vast kitchen, finds a tablet with a grocery list. She carefully dusts, even though there's almost none. She mops the already shiny floors. Everything remains just as clean, cold, and lifeless. But after a couple of days, caution begins to give way to intent. One day, returning from the store with approved groceries, she buys 3 small pots of flowers. Simple, indoor ones. Chrysanthemums, one white, one yellow, one orange. She places them on the wide windowsill in the kitchen. The bright pops of color immediately catch the eye. The room seems brighter. The next day, She buys fresh yeast, flour, and vanilla sugar. Lev returns home late. He enters the hallway and stops. He smells something, not just food, the smell of fresh, warm bread, sweet, cozy. He can't remember the last time he smelled that in his house. He goes into the kitchen. On the table, under a clean towel, lies a still warm, golden brown apple pie. Next to it is a plate and a fork, a simple sign that it's safe to eat. And on the windowsill, those same flowers glow like 3 little flames. Lev doesn't eat the pie, but he stands and looks at it, then at the flowers. His face is expressionless. He leaves the kitchen and goes up to his office. A day or two later, another change occurs. Lev is working in his office. The door is slightly open for ventilation. The usual sounds drift from the hallway. Soft footsteps, the rustle of a rag, the quiet creak of a door opening. And then, something new. It's a very quiet, barely audible hum, a simple melody without words. Iris apparently thinks she's alone on the floor, and she hums very quietly to herself as she dusts the shelves in the hallway. Lev freezes at the table. His fingers stop tapping the keyboard. He listens. The sound is so out of place in the acoustics of his home that it feels like a foreign body, but it doesn't hurt. On the contrary, the silence of the house has always been absolute, oppressive, but this quiet, vibrant sound seems to fill the void with something soft and light. He doesn't come out and make no comment. He simply sits and listens until the humming fades, dissolving into the sound of footsteps disappearing into the other room. He comes downstairs in the evening. Dinner is on the kitchen table, not a restaurant dish, but a simple home-cooked meal, stewed meat and potatoes, a fresh vegetable salad. Everything is set. But Iris is not there. She gives him space. Lev sits down and eats. He looks again at the flowers on the windowsill. They've already been watered. They look fresh. He finishes eating, washes his plate, and sets it to dry. Next to him, on a towel, there's a second plate, clean. It must be hers. He doesn't say thank you. He simply goes upstairs. But on the way, he pauses for a second in the living room. He looks at the heavy curtains, at the perfectly arranged sofa cushions. He imagines how here, in this silence, a quiet, living voice sounded today. And for the first time in many years, his fortress doesn't seem so cold. A few more days passed. Lev had almost gotten used to the new order of things. The house was still as clean as ever, but subtle signs of life had appeared. Now he was walking into his office after a morning phone meeting. He's about to sit down at the table when he notices a stack of books on the edge of the wide windowsill. 3 books. Not his. He never reads fiction. He has business publications, reference books, but not this. Lev approaches and looks at the spines. One book is a collection of short travel stories. Another is an old paperback novel. A third is a book on the history of gardening. They all look used, like they were bought at a used bookstore. He understands. Iris was cleaning here this morning. She must have been reading in her room, then went to clean the study, brought the books with her, and forgot them. Or did she leave them there on purpose? No. More likely she forgot. She wouldn't have been so brazen. Lev picks up a book about gardening. He leafs through it. In the margins are someone's old pencil marks, not hers. He puts the book back. His first impulse is to take it upstairs and leave it by the door of her room, to reprimand her, but he stops himself. These books don't bother her. They simply lie on the windowsill, where once there was only dust. They look alien, but not hostile. They are quiet, like her. Lev leaves the books where they are. He sits down to work. Every now and then, his gaze catches the colorful spines against the gray cityscape outside the window. Is it annoying? No, it's just there. A new fact. The wrong books in his perfect office. That evening, Lev comes down to the kitchen. Iris is cooking dinner. She's standing at the stove, her back to him. Iris! She turns around, shuddering slightly. She's still a little afraid of him. Yes? Lev pauses. He's used to giving orders. Do this, cook that. But now those words seem out of place. Rude. Can we have soup for lunch tomorrow? He says finally. His voice sounds unfamiliar. It's not an order. It's a request. A simple, everyday request. Of course, Iris answers quickly, and something like relief flashes in her eyes. Which one would you prefer, mushroom or chicken? Mushroom, Lev says. And after a second's pause, he adds, if it's not too much trouble. No, it's not at all difficult, she almost smiles. We just ordered fresh mushrooms. Lev nods and leaves, leaving her to cook. He notices a difference in the air. Before, his questions hung in the air like commands. Now, a thread of simple human interaction has formed between them. May I? Of course. It's a small change, but it makes all the difference. And the next day, something happens that Leo did not expect at all. He returns home later than usual. It's been a stressful day, his head buzzing with fatigue, and unpleasant conversations. He enters the hallway and is enveloped by an unusual, icy silence. A soft, crackling sound comes from the living room. A warm, flickering light plays on the wall in the hallway. And the smell. Sweet, spicy, deep cinnamon and baked apples. Lev walks slowly towards the living room. He stops at the door. A log burns in the large fireplace, which hasn't been lit in years. Not a roaring flame, but a steady, calm flame. It illuminates the room with a soft, vibrant light. On a low table in front of the fireplace sits a vase of autumn rowan branches laden with red berries, and there's a plate. On it is a golden brown strudel, the source of that magical aroma. Iris herself is nowhere to be seen, but she was clearly here. She lit the fireplace. She arranged these simple branches. She baked this pie. Lev stands rooted to the spot. He stares at the fire. The warmth from the fireplace reaches his skin, chasing away the chill it brought in from outside. He suddenly realizes with incredible clarity that in all his years in this house, he's never done this. Never lit the fireplace just for himself. Never placed anything on the table except folders of papers. He's never smelled this in the house. It's not just about order. It's about transforming space into a place you want to be, where you can throw off your coat, sit in a chair, and simply gaze at the fire. He slowly approaches and sits down in the armchair by the fireplace. He doesn't take the pie. He just sits, watches the shadows dancing on the walls, breathes in the warm air with the scent of wood and cinnamon. The buzzing in his head gradually subsides. He doesn't call Iris. He doesn't thank her. He simply accepts this gift, this silent but eloquent sign. It's not just clean here now. It's good here now. It's warm here. Half an hour later, he goes up to his room. As he passes the kitchen, he sees a light under the door. He stops. He doesn't go in. He simply says through the half-open door, knowing she'll hear him, "Thank you for the fireplace and for the pie. It's very good." There's no answer from behind the door, just a soft, barely audible sound, like someone setting down a cup. But that's enough for Lev. He goes to bed, and for the first time in a long time, he falls asleep thinking not of tomorrow's chores, but of the fire still blazing in his living room. The morning begins a bit differently than usual. Lev arrives late from a late-night meeting, sleeps in later than usual, and comes down to the kitchen around 11. He expects the kitchen to be empty and breakfast to be in the refrigerator, covered in plastic. But Iris is sitting at the table. In front of her is a cup of tea and a book, the one about gardening. She's writing something in a notebook. Seeing him, she shudders slightly and stands up. "Good morning. I thought you'd already left. I'll make some now." "Take your time," Lev says, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Just coffee." He sits down at the table, and this is new. Before he would grab a cup and go into the study. Iris places the coffee pot, sugar, and milk in front of him. She returns to her tea, but no longer reads. She sits quietly, as if she doesn't want to disturb him. Lev pours coffee. The silence is not tense, but calm. "What are you writing down?" he asks unexpectedly. "Oh, I was looking at the garden from the window," she says, a little embarrassed. "There's plenty of space. I thought we could plant a few bushes, maybe lilacs, or make a small herb garden, more economical and fresher. These are just ideas." Lev looks at her notebook. He sees neat diagrams, plant names. She's thought about this, on her own. "Do what you think is best," he says. Then, after a sip of coffee, he adds, "Just keep in mind, I don't understand any of this." "I'll figure it out," Iris says quickly. Then she decides to ask a question. She speaks carefully, looking at her cup. "And what do you like anyway? In food? I cook what I can, but maybe you have favorite dishes? Or vice versa. What don't you like?" Lev freezes, cup in hand. He's asked about his preferences. Not a business lunch, but simple food. The last time his grandmother asked him such a question seemed like 100 years ago. "I like simple food. Soups, roasts. I don't like spicy food. And too sweet," he says. And his answer sounds almost awkward. "Fish. Neutral." Iris nods, making mental notes. "Understood. Thank you. And for breakfast? Porridge, eggs, toast? Anything. Doesn't matter. But what do you like best?" she insists softly. "Eggs. With bacon. Sometimes." "Okay." She smiles at the corners of her lips. This is their first normal conversation, not connected with instructions. Later that day, Lev calls her into his office. The books are still on the windowsill. He points to the door. "Iris, this is my office. You are not allowed to come in here. Never. Even if you really have to. Even if it looks like a mess, this door is always closed. Even if it's open, you still can't. Do you understand?" He speaks sternly, again in that tone that brooks no argument. This rule isn't about clutter. It's about his other life, about papers, phones, conversations she shouldn't see or hear. Iris looks at him seriously. She doesn't ask questions. She doesn't ask why. She simply accepts this prohibition as law. I understand. I'm not going in. Ever. Okay. And that's where the conversation ends. She doesn't mention the office again. When she cleans the second floor, she wipes the floor and the outside doorknob without touching the door itself. She learned the rule the first time. A few days later, something else happens. Lev leaves the house in the evening and sees Iris on the back porch. She's sitting on the step, holding something in her clasped hands. She's quietly muttering something. Lev comes closer. He sees that in her arms sits a small, awkward chick. It is almost featherless, with a huge head and closed eyes. It is squeaking. What is this? Lev asks, and there is irritation in his voice. Iris shudders. I found it under a big tree by the fence. It fell out of the nest. It will freeze alone, or the cat will find it. And what are you going to do with him? Lev looks at this trembling creature with undisguised incomprehension. This is sentimental. Stupid. She has enough troubles as it is. I don't know. I'll warm him up for now. Maybe I'll try feeding him. Then maybe I'll take him to the animal shelter. She says this with such hope that Lev simply shakes his head. He wants to say, throw that thing away. You have things to do. But he sees how carefully her fingers warm the bird, how she looks at it, not with disgust, but with compassion. The same compassion he once saw in her eyes on the street. He's silent. Then he snorts and turns to leave, just so he doesn't make noise at night, and so there won't be that in the house. It won't! I promise, he hears her voice behind him. That evening, Lev comes into the kitchen for a drink of water. The same chick is asleep on a hot water bottle, covered with a soft cloth in the corner. Nearby is a saucer of water and a tiny pipette. Iris is nowhere to be found. The lion stands and watches this spectacle. It's absurd. It doesn't fit into his home, but it doesn't violate his rules either. The chick doesn't make any noise. He's simply sleeping in his corner, safe from the big, cold world. The lion shrugs, pours water, and leaves. He says nothing. No, throw it away. No, okay. His silence is permission, small, fragile, like the chick itself. Evenings become their time, not planned, but simply unfolding. After dinner, Lev often retreats to the living room with a folder of papers. He sits in his armchair by the extinguished but still wood-scented fireplace, turns on the floor lamp, and immerses himself in reports, figures, and contracts. A little while later, Iris appears at the door. She doesn't ask if she can come in. She simply walks in quietly, sits down on the sofa across the room, and takes an embroidery hoop and some colored thread out of a basket. She's recently started embroidering. Simple patterns, flowers. She says it's calming. The first few evenings, Lev felt her presence as something alien. He waited for her to speak, to interrupt. But Iris remained silent. Only the soft rustling of paper on his part and the barely audible sound of a needle passing through fabric on hers. And gradually this silence changed. It stopped being awkward. It became shared, comfortable. Lev notices that his shoulders are relaxed. His jaw is not clenched. He is simply working, and she is simply embroidering. They do not disturb each other. They simply share the same space, each busy with their own. This is not spending time together. This is a parallel existence, and for some reason, it has become important. He no longer feels lonely in this large house, even when they are not speaking. One such evening is interrupted by the intercom ringing. Lev frowns. No one comes to see him at this time. He goes to the panel by the entrance. Yes, boss, it's Semyon. Urgent papers. Need a signature. Lev sighs. Semyon is his right-hand man, the man in the thick of things. He knows what urgent means. Come in. A minute later, Semyon appears in the hallway. He's a middle-aged man with an intelligent, stern face. He takes off his coat and freezes. His gaze falls on the living room. Iris emerges from the living room. She heard the bell and apparently figured the guest might need tea or something else. She stops when she sees the stranger, a slight look of confusion on her face. Semyon slowly shifts his gaze from Iris to Lev. His face is a mask of politeness, but his eyes flash with a quick, unmistakable assessment. Surprise, curiosity, a quick calculation. Am I interrupting? Iris says quietly. No, Lev replies. His voice is dry, emotionless. He looks at Semyon. Iris, my housekeeper. Iris, this is Semyon, my employee. Iris nods, trying to look straight ahead. Hello? Hello? Semyon replies, his voice polite to the point of slipperiness. He tilts his head slightly. Lev sees Semyon's gaze flicker briefly over Iris, her simple clothes, her hands still clutching the embroidery. There's nothing outright rude in that gaze, but there's a hint of condescension. A slight, almost imperceptible smirk twitches at the corners of his lips. He looks at her not as a person, but as a piece of furniture, a strange quirk of his boss's. Iris feels that gaze. She steps back slightly toward the sofa. I'll make some tea, she says, and quickly heads into the kitchen. As soon as the kitchen door closes, the atmosphere in the living room changes. Lev doesn't move. He looks at Semyon. Papers, Semyon says, handing over the folder, but his eyes briefly glance toward the kitchen. I didn't know you had a housekeeper. Convenient. There's something in his tone that sends a chill down Lev's spine. Not a threat, but familiarity. A hint that he understood the situation. Semyon allowed himself a sideways glance, and that glance said it all. Ah, so that's what the boss's weaknesses are now. Lev slowly takes the folder. He doesn't open it right away. He looks up and at Semyon. He doesn't raise his voice. He even speaks more quietly than usual. Baichi. But every word falls like a stone. Iris is my housekeeper. She's responsible for this house. Her word on housekeeping matters is law here. She's treated with respect, or not treated at all. Do you understand me, Semyon? Semyon's eyes widen slightly. He hadn't expected such a direct, harsh reaction. He was used to hidden meanings, hints, and here, a direct ultimatum. Polite, but steely. Of course, boss, he nods quickly, all familiarity disappearing, replaced by his usual businesslike composure. I didn't think otherwise. I was just surprised. Don't be surprised anymore, Lev snaps. He opens the folder, quickly skims the documents, signs them and hands it back. That's it. You can go. Semyon takes the folder, nods again and leaves. Lev hears the front door slam. He stands in the middle of the living room. The kitchen is quiet. Iris doesn't come out. Lev goes to the kitchen door. It's ajar. Iris! She comes out. Her face is tense. The tea is almost ready. No need, says Lev. He's gone. Everything is fine. She looks at him, and he sees in her eyes the remnants of the awkwardness from the look Semyon gave her. He's an important employee of yours. I'm probably the odd one out here. You're not the odd one out, he interrupts her, his voice losing its steely hardness and sounding simply like a statement. You live here. This is your home. No one has the right to look down on you. No one. Iris is silent, simply nodding. She doesn't know what to say to such a direct defense. Okay, Lev waves his hand, as if brushing the topic aside. Go on, I'll work on it some more. He returns to his papers. A moment later, Iris brings him a cup of tea, places it on the table next to him without a word, and sits down again with her embroidery. Silence descends upon the room once more, but now it's filled with a new understanding. He protected her, not from physical threat, but from disrespect. And with that single action, he drew the line. She's not just a random visitor here. She's under his protection. A couple of days pass after Semyon's visit. Lev returns from the city. In his hands, he carries not only documents, but also a small, beautiful box wrapped in matte paper. He finds Iris in the kitchen. She's disassembling the dishwasher. Here, he says, placing the box on the table. Iris turns around, wiping her hands. She looks at the box, then at him. What is this? Open it. She carefully unfolds the paper. Inside is a wooden box, and inside it are several tins of aromatic tea, jasmine, bergamot, wild berries, spicy orange. It all looks expensive and elegant. To make the house smell even better, Lev explains, his voice slightly embarrassed. He's not used to giving gifts without a reason. Iris looks at the jars silently. She didn't expect this. This is very beautiful. Thank you. But it's probably too expensive. It's just tea, he says dismissively. Drink it and enjoy. He leaves, leaving her alone with the gift. Iris opens one of the jars, inhales the aroma, and smiles softly. For Lev, it was a way of saying thank you and sorry for Semyon's sideways glance, without actually saying the words. She understands that. That night, Lev wakes up to a scream. Short, desperate, feminine. He instantly sits up in bed. The house is quiet, dark. He thinks he dreamed it. But no, the scream was real. From there, from Iris's room. He gets up, throws on a robe. He goes out into the dark hallway. The light under her door is out. A muffled sob comes from behind the door. Then silence. Lev freezes just outside the door. His hand instinctively reaches for the handle. But he stops himself. He has no right to barge in. He has no right to see her in such a moment of weakness. It would violate all the invisible boundaries they had so carefully constructed. He stands like that for a few minutes, listening. There are no more sounds. Only the heavy, even breathing behind the door. She seems to have fallen asleep again, or is simply lying there silently. Lev slowly returns to his bedroom. He doesn't lie down. He sits on the bed and smokes in the dark, looking out the window. That scream reminded him that she has a past. A painful, difficult one that still gives him nightmares, and he can't do anything about it. He can give her a roof over her head, a job, and protect her from prying eyes, but not from her memories. In the morning, The ice haying. He comes down to the kitchen earlier than usual. Iris is already there. She's standing by the window, looking out into the garden. Her eyes are red and puffy, her face pale. She doesn't hear him come in. Lev doesn't say a word. He silently turns on the coffee machine. He makes 2 cups. He places one on the table in front of her. Then he sits down opposite her. Iris turns around, seeing the coffee. She slowly walks over and sits down. She doesn't look at him. "I'm sorry," she says quietly. "I must have screamed last night. I woke you up." "It's okay," he replies just as quietly. "Drink your coffee." They drink in silence. The silence isn't prickly, but rather tired and shared. There's no need to explain anything. He doesn't ask. She doesn't make excuses. They simply sit and drink hot coffee, looking out the window at different angles. This is their first breakfast together, and it passes without words. But that's precisely what makes it normal. There's no need to pretend everything is fine. A few days later, Lev returns home in the worst possible condition. He's suffering from a devastating migraine. Light hurts his eyes, and every sound sends a throbbing pain through his temples. He barely makes it to the living room and sinks into a chair, covering his eyes with his hand. He hears footsteps. Iris. He can't say anything. He feels her approaching. He hears her turn off the main light, leaving only the far floor lamp on. The footsteps recede, then return. Something cool and wet is placed on his forehead, a clean towel soaked in cold water. Then 2 tablets are carefully placed in his hand. A glass of water is placed on the table nearby. Lev opens his eyes to get some water. He sees Iris, without a word, already walking out of the living room. She doesn't ask him what happened, doesn't fuss, doesn't pester him with questions. She simply did what was necessary and gives him peace. "Thank you," he says hoarsely into her back. She stops at the door, nods, and quietly closes the door, leaving him alone in the semi-darkness. Lev lies with a towel over his forehead, holding pills in his hand. He thinks about how strange life is. He has people ready to fulfill his every command, to solve any problem in his cruel world. But in a moment of weakness, simple human help, bringing him painkillers and turning out the lights, was only provided by this girl he picked up on the street. Someone with no position, no power, no connections, only quiet attentiveness. He swallows the pills. The pain slowly begins to recede, and he realizes that this is probably the calmest and safest moment he's felt in years. He's sick, he's weak, but he doesn't need to pretend to be strong. Because there's someone in the house who sees this weakness and doesn't use it against him. They simply bring him a cool towel. Days pass, filled with a quiet rhythm. One evening, they're in the living room again. Lev is reading a business magazine. Iris is knitting something warm, presumably for the winter. The house smells of the same bergamot tea he gave her. Iris puts down her knitting. She looks at the fire in the fireplace, then carefully turns her gaze to Lev. She is silent for a long time, gathering her courage. "Lev?" Her voice is quiet, as if she's afraid to disturb the silence. He doesn't look up from his magazine. "Do you have a family? Relatives?" The question hangs in the air. Lev slowly lowers the magazine. His face becomes inscrutable. He looks not at her, but somewhere in front of him. A few seconds pass. "No," he says finally. One word, short, like a gunshot. There is no anger in it, no sadness. There is only finality. Like a statement of fact, the sky is blue, the water is wet, there is no family. Iris nods, as if she'd expected that answer. She doesn't ask why. She doesn't say what a shame. She simply accepts it as another rule of the house. "I see," she says quietly, and goes back to knitting. They don't return to this topic again, but this question and this answer create a new understanding between them. They are both lonely, each in their own way, for different reasons. And this big house has become a refuge from this loneliness for both of them. A couple of weeks later, something happens that Lev completely unexpectedly. He doesn't even remember the date until he starts receiving strange messages from partners and subordinates in the morning. Standard, dry, happy birthday messages. Businesslike. He ignores them. For him, it's not a holiday, just a mark on the calendar. Another excuse for obligatory phone calls. He returns home late, tired of these formalities. He enters and freezes. The light is on in the living room. On the table in the dining room, which they rarely use, sits a cake. Not a huge, fancy restaurant cake, but a simple homemade one. A sponge cake, covered in a thin layer of chocolate icing, topped with crumbs and nuts. Next to it lies an open cardboard box, containing a single large candle shaped like a number. He doesn't even look to see what the number is. Iris stands nearby. She's wearing her usual apron. Her face is a mixture of embarrassment and determination. "Happy birthday," she says simply. Lev looks from the cake to her. He doesn't know what to say. How did she know? She probably saw the date on some documents in the kitchen or overheard him talking on the phone. "Why?" he finally says, not grumpily, but with genuine bewilderment. "Because it's a birthday," Iris shrugs. "We need to celebrate. at least with a cake. He comes closer. The pie smells of vanilla and cocoa. Simple, homemade. I'm not celebrating, he says, but his voice is no longer as firm as before. Nobody's forcing you. You can just try. I followed the recipe in the book. It seems to have worked. Lev sits silently at the table. Iris quickly cuts a piece, places it on a plate, and sets it in front of him. Then she steps back, giving him space, and sits down on a chair on the other side of the table. He tastes it. The cake is truly simple, not too sweet, moist, like something his grandmother might have baked, if he had one. It's fine, he says, chewing. Thank you. Iris smiles. She wasn't expecting the excitement. I make better apple cider. Strudel, she notes. I'll make it next time. Next time. The words hang in the air. They suggest there will be another birthday, that he will live another year, that she will be here another year. It is an assumption about the future. Lev finishes his piece. He doesn't ask for another. He just sits and looks at this single candle, this modest cake on the big table. He remembers his holidays of recent years. Expensive restaurants, business dinners masquerading as congratulations, gifts, bribes, and beautiful packages. Nothing real. Nothing simple. And this cake, baked simply because it had to be, seems like the most sincere gift he's received in years. There's no calculation in it, just attention. Thank you so much, Iris, he says again. And this time there's something more than the usual reserve in his voice, a slight, unfamiliar warmth. She nods, stands, and begins clearing the table. The party is over. It lasted exactly 10 minutes. But for Lev, this was the first non-business party, the first that was about him, not his position. And he realizes that this simple piece of homemade cake means much more to him than all those expensive dinners. Information, like water, always finds a crack. The news that Lev had a young woman living in his house first spread in whispers among his own people. Then, through a careless word from someone on the fringes, it reached the ears of those who watched Lev with cold interest. For his world, this isn't just gossip. It's a point of pressure, vulnerability. Before, Leo was like a granite rock. No family, no attachments, nothing to cling to. And now he has leverage, weakness. Its name is Iris. Lev is one of the last to know about this. Semyon reports to him, his face expressing businesslike concern, but his eyes reading, I told you so. Boss, there's talk on the airwaves. Everyone knows about your housekeeper. They're interested. They're asking questions. What questions? Lev's voice is cold. How dear is she to you? How attached are you to her? Semyon chooses his words carefully. It's a signal. They're surveying the area. Lev doesn't answer. He simply lets Semyon go. But when the door closes, his fist lands hard but silently on the table. He wasn't afraid for himself, but now he realizes he's afraid for her. He's made her a target. The first warning comes a week later. Early morning, a guard finds a package at the back gate. Neat, clean. They bring it to Lev unopened. Lev unwraps the package in his office. Inside lies a doll, a simple rag one, and the doll's dress is sewn from scraps of bright, sunny fabric. Lev recognizes the pattern. It's the same cheap tablecloth Iris bought on her very first day, the one that lay on the table in the apartment on Gorokovaya Street, so they know more than just her existence. They dug deeper. They found that very first temporary shelter. They figured out the details. And now they've sent this symbol. We know all about your weakness. We can get to it. The doll is Iris, bright, defenseless. The rage that rises in Leo is cold and silent. It doesn't scream. It freezes from within. He squeezes the doll so tightly in his hand that he almost breaks the frame. Then, slowly, with incredible effort, he forces himself to calm down. He places the doll back in its package and hides it in the safe. This is proof and a verdict. All day, he behaves as usual. But inside, everything is calculated, deliberate. In the evening, he calls the head of security. Starting tomorrow, double the outer guards. Put 2 more cameras on the east wall and by the garages. Check everyone who enters, even my people, more thoroughly. All food deliveries must be sent only through one trusted courier. Everything must be opened and checked. The head of security nods, making notes. Is there a specific threat, boss? There's a general one. Tensions are rising. We need to be prepared for anything, Lev replies dryly. He can't tell the truth. The truth would make Iris look like bait in her own eyes. The next morning, Iris notices changes. More people in black are walking around the compound. New cameras are slowly turning along the walls. Did something happen? She asks Lev cautiously over breakfast. The usual precautions, he says, not looking up from his newspaper. These are turbulent times. Better safe than sorry. She looks at him, trying to figure out if he's hiding something, but his face is a stony mask. Is this because of me? Her voice is quiet. Lev abruptly puts down the newspaper. No, because of business. Don't worry, just don't go outside the fence without an escort. And if you see anything strange, tell me or the guards right away. His tone leaves no room for argument. Iris falls silent, but the worry remains in her eyes. She's not stupid. She feels the atmosphere thicken. The air in the house, which had become so warm, is once again filled with an invisible tension. Lev sees her fear. It hurts him more than any threat. He built her a refuge, and now that refuge has become the most secure and dangerous cage in the world. He rises from the table. Everything will be all right, Iris. I promise. He says it with such iron certainty that she involuntarily nods. She believes him, and this trust becomes the heaviest burden for Lev. He must live up to it, at any cost. The tension doesn't subside. Lev sees Iris flinch at every unexpected call, her nervous glances out the windows. Her fear cuts him to the quick. He understands that knowledge is sometimes safer than ignorance. One evening, after dinner, he stops her in the hallway. Iris, come into my office for a minute. She freezes, her eyes widening. The never-enter rule was ironclad. But you said not to. I know. Follow me. He opens the door and lets her in the Holy of Holies. The room is as stern and businesslike as he is. A large desk, a computer, safes, bookshelves filled with folders. He approaches one of the shelves, pushes aside a heavy economics tome, and presses a barely noticeable button on the wall. With a soft click, a small panel with a red button and a timer opens. This is a direct alarm, he says, not looking at her. It's not connected to the main system. If something bad happens, if you sense real danger inside the house, press it. It doesn't matter if it's day or night. It will only call my personal group and me. It always works. Remember this place. Iris looks silently between the panel and him. For Lev, this is an act of unprecedented trust. He didn't just let her into the office. He gave her the key to his emergency system, a key that could lead his people directly into the house at any time. Okay, she says quietly. I remember. And so you don't forget. He closes the panel, the book returning to its place. Come in once a week and check that it's there. Just slide the book open and take a look. He leads her back into the hallway. Trust has been placed. Now she's not completely defenseless. But this trust has a downside. She's now drawn even deeper into his dangerous world. The next morning, Iris comes into the kitchen with a determined look. Lev is drinking coffee, his face tired. Lev, I need to talk. Talk. I've been thinking all night. I should go. The coffee freezes halfway to his lips. He sets the cup down slowly. Why? Because of all this. She gestures toward the house, toward the invisible guards outside the windows. Because of the tension. Because you increase security. I'm not blind. It's because of me. I've become a problem. Your weakness, as they say. I don't want to be a burden. I don't want to cause trouble. I'll leave, find another job, and everything will calm down. She says this evenly, but the trembling in her hands reveals how afraid she is. It's scary to go into the unknown, but even more scary to stay and be the cause of trouble for him. Lev stands up. His movement is abrupt. He comes so close to her that she involuntarily takes a step back. You don't understand anything. His voice is low, muffled. You're not a burden, and you're not leaving. But, no, but! He almost raises his voice, but immediately controls himself, lowering his tone to a dangerous whisper. You are not to blame for anything. The one who decided to play these games is to blame. I am to blame for not foreseeing this. But it's not your fault, and you have nowhere to go. This is your home. And as long as I'm here, no one will dare touch you. No one. Forget about this conversation. He looks at her with such intensity that it takes her breath away. There's no tenderness in his words. There's a steely determination bordering on obsession. He won't let her go because she's not a weakness, but part of the little light left in his life. And he will protect that light to the end. And the end comes faster than he expected. Lev discovers who was behind the gift with the doll. It wasn't the main force, but a small but brazen group that decided to test the limits. They wanted to scare him, to show him they could get what they wanted. Lev gets them quickly and mercilessly. He doesn't appear himself, but his men conduct explanatory talks. The methods are familiar, effective, and brutal. When the results are reported to him, he nods, his face stony. The threat is neutralized. The boundaries are drawn. But late in the evening, returning to a quiet, safe house smelling of tea and cookies, he stops in the hallway. He looks at his hands. Clean. He didn't touch anyone, but he gave orders. And now, somewhere, people are licking their wounds, remembering his name with fear, and all because of her, because of Iris. He climbs the stairs. Light streams from under her door. He stops opposite. She's there, safe, reading, perhaps, or sleeping. She doesn't know what happened today. She doesn't know what measures have been taken to protect her. And then a wave of heavy, bitter realization washed over him. He had fought the threat with his own methods, the methods of his dark world. And now, through his fault, she had become part of that world. Not directly, but the shadow of his actions had fallen on her as well. He had meant to give her refuge, but instead, he had brought a storm with him. He had drawn her into his war, a war she didn't even suspect. He doesn't regret what he did. He'd do it again. But for the first time in years, he feels not just responsibility, but guilt. He rescued her from the streets, only to thrust her into the center of another, more dangerous storm. And now there's no escape, not for her, not for him. The matter was over, not simply finished, but destroyed, reduced to dust. The methods had been such that even his seasoned men's eyes glazed over as they reported. Lev listened to everything, nodding, asking short, precise questions. Then he dismissed everyone. He sat alone in his office, in complete darkness, save for the streetlights outside. His hands lay heavy and clean on the desk. There was emptiness inside, as cold and silent as his home before her. He knew what he had to do next. Check other sites, discuss new boundaries with partners, hold a meeting to consolidate the results. His mind automatically compiled a to-do list, but his body refused to obey. It didn't want any more meetings, no more conversations, no more this chair, permeated with the smell of cigars and cold decisions. He stood up, grabbed his coat, gave the driver an unexpected address. Not headquarters, not a club, not a restaurant, home. The road seemed endless. The city flashed past the tinted glass, bright, soulless. Lev looked at it, not seeing it. It wasn't the streets that stood before his eyes, but other images. He pushed them away, gritting his teeth. This was the price of what he wanted to protect. The car finally pulled up to the familiar gates. They slid silently open. The house stood there, as always, solid and dark, but not all of it. Lights were on in the first-floor windows, warm, yellow, dim. Not a signal light, but a residential one. Lev stepped out of the car. The night air was chilly, but not as biting as usual. He walked toward the door, his legs seeming to grow heavier with each step. Fatigue set in as soon as he crossed the boundary of his territory. Here, he didn't need to hold his shield. He opened the door, and a scent enveloped him. Not just the smell of cleanliness, of freshly baked bread. Sweet, dense, grounding, and beneath it, a subtle hint of vanilla, and something else, peaceful, simply calm. The silence here wasn't empty, but filled, with the ticking of a clock, the soft crackling of a fire somewhere in the distance, his own slowed breathing. He took off his coat and tossed it on a chair in the hallway, an unheard-of liberty for him, always so neat. He walked deeper into the house. The kitchen was perfectly tidy, but on the table, under a clean towel, lay a still warm loaf of bread. Nearby lay butter and a knife. Everything was waiting for him. He wasn't hungry, but he broke off a piece, still warm, with a crisp crust. He tried it. Simple, delicious, homemade. He walked further into the living room. The door was slightly open. A soft light from the floor lamp and a flickering orange glow from the fire poured in. Lev stopped in the doorway, without entering, becoming an invisible witness. Iris sat in a large armchair by the fireplace, her legs tucked under her. She wore thick knitted socks. She was always cold. An open book lay on her lap. She was reading. Her face was calm, lit from below by the fire, from above by the lamplight. A strand of dark hair had escaped and fallen onto her cheek. She didn't notice. She was completely immersed in another world. Safe and distant, she muttered something quietly as she read, and a faint smile touched her lips. Then she turned the page and adjusted the blanket on her lap. Her movements were slow, peaceful. She felt safe here, at home. Lev stood and watched. He didn't think about what had happened today. He didn't think about enemies, borders, money, and power. All of that receded, dissolved in the warm air of this room. Before him was a simple picture. A girl by the fireplace, a book, a quiet evening in a house that smelled of bread. And then it hit him, not with emotion, but with a clear, cold, mountain spring-like realization. He was right. That night, wet asphalt, a crying shadow against the garage wall, his irritation, his irrational, get in the car, all of this, every moment, was not a mistake, not a weakness. It was the best, most successful investment of his life, in his survival. He bought houses, stocks, companies. He built an empire, but they were all just walls, fortresses, like this house before. Cold, solid, lifeless. You could hide in them, but you couldn't live in them. And that night, that thoughtless act, brought him something that no amount of money could buy. It brought life into his fortress. Simple, human, fragile life. The kind that puts flowers on the windowsill. The kind that bakes bread. The kind that turns on the fireplace because it needs to be warm in the evening. The kind that asks what kind of soup he likes. He looked at her and understood that everything he had done today and all these years had one purpose: for this painting to exist, for this fire to burn in the fireplace, so that she could sit here, perfectly safe, and read her book with a smile. His cruelty, his power, his cold calculation, all of it was simply tools. Tools for protecting this singular, fragile present. The house was no longer a fortress. Fortresses protect from the outside world, but they are cold and empty. This house had become a refuge. A refuge doesn't just protect. It warms. It heals. It gives peace. Iris looked up, feeling his eyes on her. She saw him standing in the doorway. Her smile didn't fade, but instead became slightly questioning. "Is everything okay? You're so late. Are you hungry? The bread is still warm." "I'm okay," he said, his voice hoarse from the unfamiliarity of speaking quietly here in the living room. "I already tried it. Thank you." He took a step forward, finally crossing the threshold, not to sit down, just to be closer to the warmth. "You weren't sleeping?" "I was reading. I got really engrossed." She pointed to the book. "About old gardens. It has such ideas." She fell silent, as if realizing he might not be interested. He walked over to the fireplace and held his hands out to the flames. The heat burned his palms, driving away the residual chill. "Tell me sometime," he said. It wasn't a promise, but permission, an invitation. Iris nodded, her eyes back on her book, but the corners of her lips were now turned up. The lion stood by the fire and watched the flames lick the logs. He listened to the silence of the house, true silence, not the absence of sounds, but their harmony, the crackle of the fire, the rustle of pages, his own calm breathing. He was right. He found on the street not a burden, but that very missing element, that very simple thing that transforms space into a place, that transforms a fortress into a home. And he knew he would defend it to the end, not because he had to, but because it was the only thing in his life truly worth protecting.